Today we're heading back into Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 to take a look at the lovable, fuzzy toy that wants nothing more than to be our friend. If you were immediately thinking, it must be Huggy Wuggy, you were close. Today we'll be investigating the Blue Terror's other half, Kissy Missy, and theorizing about why she seems to be helping us. Could Kissy Missy's intentions here be true? Or is it all an elaborate plot to lure us into our demise? This toy, reminiscent of a wacky, waving, inflatable arm tube man, is Huggy Wuggy's twin in all but color. Looking at it from a gamer standpoint, she would be the dreaded reused asset with a color swap. Oh, and eyelashes. We can't forget those. However, is there something deeper going on with Kissy Missy to separate her further from her murderous blue counterpart? During our one, and so far only interaction with Kissy, she seems to be actively assisting us in a situation where she could have just as easily chased us down to kill us. Perhaps Huggy himself would be a good subject to start an investigation with. We've looked at him in the past, as well as the ominous Experiment 1006, the prototype. Chronologically speaking, Huggy Wuggy's creation occurred sometime after 1006. The prototype, as noted in the gray tape from Chapter 1, has murderous tendencies that are hard to look past. This experiment has killed employees since its creation, by using its ingenuity to great success. With the black tape in Chapter 2, we see this in full effect, as it took apart a clock within its holding cell and used parts to create a laser pointer to disable the room's security camera. This escape attempt ultimately failed, but resulted in the death of one person. These points are important to bring up, as with each new experiment, Playtime Co. has slowly been working the kinks out, so to speak. Huggy Wuggy is noted in this same black tape as having experiment number 1170, which would theoretically put him 164 iterations newer than the prototype. The narrator here also makes it a point to compare the two experiments, calling to attention that Huggy is the optimal subject, as he displays the ideal level of intelligence and obedience. This is significant, because Kissy Missy should be the iteration that came after Huggy, which would mean there would be further improvements made no matter how small. Of course, we know Huggy to have his own violent tendencies, now thanks to the interactions in Chapter 1. But was this always the case for him, or a more recent development? Let's take a look at some things with that in mind, as well as some details that could both support and punch holes in our developing theory. The idea that Kissy Missy is truly out to help us. Likely the most important subject to investigate for a look at Kissy Missy's personality and true intent is Mommy Longlegs, as her status, and frankly existence, both help and hurt the proposed theory. To begin, Mommy is clearly hostile to us, the player, as we have a connection with Playtime Co. itself. She knows that we used to work here, as she states in the chapter. Her violence seems to be directed at anyone with connections to the company, regardless of the nature of the connection. From what we can see, the reasoning here could be that she harbors resentment towards the company for experimenting on her and turning her into a toy. Her former identity being Marie Payne, as noted on a paper found in the game. With that in mind, it wouldn't be a stretch to make the assumption that all living toys within Playtime Co. would have a default attitude of at least dislike, if not hatred, towards anyone affiliated with the company. With that comes an alternate side to her, however, which she shows to be caring and motherly towards other experiments and children, at least at first. If they fail her though, we can see she kills them like Bunzo Bunny and the Huggy Wuggies and Wacka Wuggy. For Kissy Missy, this could be important. Mommy seems as though she was an unwilling subject in this process, but what if Kissy wasn't? We theorized a while ago that Poppy Playtime herself is formerly Stella Graber, who, at least in the pink tape from Chapter 1, seemed to potentially desire this sort of outcome in some capacity. But another way to look at it is Poppy being Ludwig's deceased child, unknown to us how that played out. Which means Stella could be Kissy Missy, and that could perhaps explain her more docile nature. There is a scrapped ending that can be found in Chapter 2 that sheds some more light on Poppy, and it definitely makes you wonder. She talks about how she caused so many people to die, almost like she had to be perfect. This makes me think of the Ludwig child scenario, despite this being a scrapped ending. Continuing our brief look at Mommy Longlegs for our comparison, she is designated as Experiment 1222. This of course makes her a later iteration than Huggy Wuggy, the so-called ideal experiment. This fact alone can punch a hole in the assumption that simply being a newer model would eliminate any violent tendencies. So with that in mind, just what is Kissy Missy's deal here? Well, as we noted, Mommy does not become a fiendish monster around children in other experiments, unless those experiments fail her, barring the prototype, which she seems to be absolutely terrified of. This could be a trait that every experiment shares, a sense of kinship with others who have shared their unfortunate fate at the hands of the mad scientists of Playtime Co. Right now, Kissy Missy appears to be benevolent, The sole interaction we have with her has us looking at her through a set of metal bars as she ominously approaches. For a moment, she seems to consider us thoughtfully, before deciding to try to pull the lever on the wall with her floppy arm. She then makes her exit before we can make any meaningful pursuit. If we take everything we've looked at into consideration, we can start to paint a picture of Kissy being a good character, at least on a temporary basis. Another consideration is the information we receive from her collectible, which cites that she is Huggy's better half. Though this could just be marketing, it is notable that she would be next in the Huggy Wuggy line of experimentation, as opposed to a later but different experiment like Mommy Longlegs. Kissy Missy would be a direct iteration of everything that made Huggy Wuggy desirable, which hypothetically could minimize or eliminate the violent streak that we ourselves had the pleasure of dealing with. The final detail to consider is the very first note we receive in the game as a whole, the one written in crayon, with all the errors a child would make. "Find the flower. We're still here," it reads. Could Kissy Missy still be involved with a group of children, or experiments that are acting as a calming element like what we read regarding Mommy Longlegs? Up until this point, we haven't seen any experiments actively interacting with each other with direct contact, with the exception of the prototype in Mommy Longlegs, which was nothing but creepy. All this allows us to ultimately arrive at our theory, or theories surrounding Kissy. Currently, we believe that she was either a willing participant in these experiments, similar to how, at least initially, Stella Graber appeared to be, or that she is regularly around a group of children or other experiments and has had her post-experiment anger held in check by this fact. These ideas have a number of interesting implications, ranging from Kissy being free from rage, no matter where she may be, and the idea that there could be a group of experiments hiding somewhere. More intriguing still would be if these experiments all knew that their sanity depended on them staying together. Kissy Missy, an anomaly of good nature in a sea of violence, or a member of a group just trying to keep their wits long enough to be saved. Is she Stella? Why did she help us? Let me know your theories in the comments below, subscribe if you enjoyed this, and until next time, horror fans, cheers!